Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. It is an honor to have you here with us today. Welcome to our Action Lab on SNAP E&T. First of all, I want to introduce myself. My name is Amanda Winters. I'm a Program Director for Post-Secondary Education at the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices. I'm so fortunate in my work at NGA that I get to bring experience to bear in crafting responsive projects and technical assistance that speaks to the needs on the ground, the critical work that all of you are doing every day to serve the people of your states. We're so pleased to be able to offer this learning and collaboration opportunity through the generous support from the Siemens Foundation, a longstanding supporter and thought partner of NGA, who prioritizes equity and opportunity within pathways to high quality jobs. I'm so fortunate also to have my colleagues, specifically Rachel Hirsch, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, who is truly running this show. So next, let me tell you just a bit about our organization before we jump into today's topic. NGA is the voice of the nation's governors. We call ourselves boldly bipartisan. For our policy work, what that means is we're driven by outcomes and innovation. The laboratory of policy is the work that you and your peers are doing to support residents of your state and to advance good policy and support for your diverse regions and communities. The Center for Best Practices, where I am based, is the technical assistance and consultative arm of the National Governors Association. We serve all governors and their teams in the development and implementation of evidence-based policy. Our teams cover a range of policy areas from early childhood to energy, health, public safety, workforce, economic development, and education issues. In normal times, we focus our work on long-term policy-focused engagement with states. More recently, we have been thinking about COVID response and recovery within state policy work. To support this meeting, we've pulled together a team that represents our workforce development, children and families, and post-secondary policy areas. This cross-sector approach exemplifies the ways in which we approach our policy matrixing to best serve the diverse state needs and perspectives that craft state policy solutions. A great example of cross-sector programming is our focus for today, SNAP Employment and Training. SNAP E&T program helps SNAP participants access opportunities to gain skills and find work. It can also help to reduce barriers to work by providing support services such as transportation and childcare as participants prepare for and obtain employment. As evidenced by the state teams that have come together for this action lab, SNAP E&T is a program that speaks across state government, from human services to workforce and education partners, as well as community-based partners and organizations. The power of this program can come through the intersection and collaboration between these state and public and private partners and local players, all focused on increasing opportunity and economic mobility for individuals and families. So before we get much further, I want to get everybody warmed up by asking a quick question and getting your response in the chat. We want to do a quick temperature check on folks' level of expertise and knowledge about SNAP E&T. So I will tell you, we do not expect everyone to be deep in the weeds of SNAP policy who is on this call today. You can also be here to engage and learn, which is certainly something I'm going to be doing as we hear from the experts across today's event. But I would like for you to self-identify your own level of knowledge by writing either expert, passable, or beginner in the chat. I had other terms that I thought of before, like newbie or something like that, but I thought I'll just give it expert, passable, or beginner in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of passables, seeing a lot of beginners. I feel seen. I feel like I'm in my element here with the passables and the beginners. The experts are all intimidating me. Somewhere between passable and expert. Awesome. Good. I feel like we've got a great range here. A somewhat expert, I also saw pop up. That'll be an interesting one. We can delve into that later. But I'm seeing a great range here. And I love that there's a lot of beginners on the line with us because that's what today is about. It's really about, look, let's get down to the nuts and bolts of what is SNAP E&T, how can it be leveraged to support individuals, to support upskilling, economic mobility for families. How can we better utilize this strategy within our state work? So we're so excited that all of the beginners have joined us. We plan to learn from all of the experts, and those passable folks, maybe you'll learn some things that you didn't know before, or you can help lead us beginners in learning even more than we know now. So hopefully by the end of us, all of us will at least feel passable with our knowledge about SNAP E&T. Just so everyone is aware, this Action Lab is made up of 2 days of sessions and content. So this first day is open to the public and is being recorded, so that, again, you can share it with your friends. The second day is reserved for a group of 13 state teams who have submitted applications and are planning on combining their state priorities with some of the expertise and ideas from this event to dive deep into SNAP E&T and lay out some next steps for their work. So the audience today is a mix of state team members, representatives from the federal government, national partner organizations, and other interested folks. We're excited to learn with all of you today and to set the stage for some great state-specific conversations tomorrow. We are fortunate to have as our partner in this work a team from Education Strategy Group, who you will be seeing and hearing from throughout the Action Lab. So don't be surprised as we jump back and forth between National Governors Association folks and ESG. So we're so pleased to have them as a partner on this. We would not be able to get any of this critical work done without their partnership. We're also very grateful to several partner organizations, federal and state partners who have agreed to lend their expertise for this event. You're going to hear from some of them today who certainly have been helping us to form our thoughts about the ways in which we can support states in this policy area. As I mentioned before, my colleague Rachel Hirsch, a senior policy analyst here at the NGA Center, is the true leader of this effort on our team, and I'm pleased to turn the meeting over to her so that she can preview today's agenda and move us into our first expert session. Rachel?
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. And thanks for that wonderful introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Hirsch. As Amanda said, I'm a senior policy analyst on the post-secondary education team here at NGA. Really excited to be involved in this day, and thank you all so much for joining us. Right after I stop speaking, we are going to turn it over to the experts. And if you want proof, look in the chat. One of our first speakers is the last person to enter expert, and I'm so glad she has, because we're relying on her for her expertise here. To give us an overview of SNAP E&T 101, what are some of the policy levers that you all can be thinking about operationalizing in SNAP E&T, and how do we do so? And there will be a question and answer after their presentation as well. So as anyone is speaking during this, please feel free to use the chat to ask a question. We will be monitoring that throughout and making sure we get to those questions. Then we'll hear from an example in the field from a provider in Idaho that's providing education and training services using funding from SNAP E&T. We'll have a short break, and then we'll come back to an armchair conversation with a representative from the USDA's Food and Nutrition Services. Again, you'll be able to ask questions during this portion as well. At the end, we wanted to offer you a chance to hear from some of our national partners. This work is a part of our State Equitable Recovery Coalition, where we work with 19 other national organizations to align and collaborate on work in this space at the intersection of state policy, economic recovery, post-secondary education. And we've benefited from much of their expertise, many of whom you'll hear today. And we also want you all to be able to benefit from the resources they can provide going forward on SNAP E&T in particular. If this is an issue you decide, and we hope you do, to continue to work on over the months ahead, then there are some really exciting opportunities that they're going to talk about that you can follow up with them as well. Finally, we'll end with a bit of a summary and some thoughts to bring with you at the end of the day. And for those state teams that will be participating in tomorrow, we'll see you then. So with that, next slide. I'm going to introduce two of our foremost experts that have helped craft this to give us that SNAP E&T 101 overview. We have Mary Nelson, who is a policy associate with the American Public Human Services Association, or APHSA for short. They're a membership organization of human services professionals throughout the country. And we have Susan O'Callaghan, who is a senior consultant at the Seattle Jobs Institute. And together they have years of experience helping states with technical assistance to scale and expand their SNAP employment and training operations, both through nonprofit management and through direct services. So we're really excited to hear from them today. I know all of us, myself included, will learn a lot. So with that, I'm going to first pass it over to Mary.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, and it's so exciting to be here. I have to say, I'm going to just make some high-level remarks before turning it over to Susan, because if I'm an expert, she is a super expert. So I really want to yield most of the time to her to really get into the nuts and bolts of SNAP E&T. But before I do that, I wanted to share some high-level remarks from the perspective of human services. So for those of you who don't know, the American Public Human Services Association represents state and local health and human services agencies through their top level leadership, and that includes SNAP directors and the corresponding staff that run the SNAP employment and training programs. And as you'll learn, SNAP E&T is administered by the State Health and Human Services Agency. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of context about what we're hearing through our work representing our members and talking to many, many different SNAP E&T staff and seeing how different programs are running. The other thing I want to share, which I'm not going to delve too deeply into because I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this later on, is that we also are one of the recipients of the National Partnership Grants from the Food and Nutrition Services, which gives us the opportunity to really leverage national membership networks to advance SNAP employment and training through third-party partnerships. And one of our partners in that project happens to be the Association of Community College Trustees. So we have the privilege of working with many different community colleges to learn how they are currently leveraging SNAP E&T to serve their students and also to support them on their pathway in becoming potential providers. So through our project and through working with our members, it's given us really a unique perspective on how SNAP E&T can be leveraged as part of an overall strategy for workforce development and economic recovery with community colleges at the center. So I want to mention one part of our project, which is our symposium for partnership and collaboration, which brought together 21 state agencies and correspondingly providers from those states to really take a deep dive into what makes a good partnership. What makes a successful SNAP E&T program? And we had lots of community college participation in that. So hopefully some of the observations that we garner will be really helpful to you all. But I want to point out some words that Amanda said earlier, which were intersection, collaboration, and learning, because the one thing we learned across all of these states is that what makes successful programs that are really led by the State Human Services Association is partnership and collaboration. No program is working well without working together. So at the same time, we also learned that all of these programs are so unique and rich. And there's an opportunity for those of you who are coming from the community college perspective, from the human services perspective, from the gubernatorial offices, to really think about how to make this program fit the structure of your government and the needs of your state and local communities. One thing I want to point out is that while today we're really thinking about leveraging the higher education system, there's an opportunity to really think about what we call the ecosystem of employment and training, which includes agencies like the State Workforce Agency, state and local workforce boards, of course, community colleges, but even at a higher level, community college boards and governing bodies within the state that can really be leveraged to develop effective partnerships to meet the overall needs of your community members and your students. There's also a really incredible opportunity to create a program that works for your specific communities. And one of the things I want to point out that providers that are working at the ground floor are often the experts in the community needs. So there's a real opportunity to think creatively about partnerships that fulfill the needs of your communities, but also how these agencies support and guide each other in their policies and practices, as well as effective rating and blending of funding. And overall, how those that are working directly with the students and individuals in their community can inform the way that workforce development advances in an overall strategy at the highest level of government. Additionally, there are opportunities to really think about dedicated funding at the state level, because as you'll hear from Susan, SNAP E&T works with a particular funding stream, and that has its own rules. And when states can dedicate some funding there, there are opportunities to maximize on the impacts of SNAP employment and training, as well as maximize on your federal dollars. And there's also an opportunity to really target the needs of specific populations. So there are some populations that sometimes are not traditionally thought of around SNAP E&T, and that includes foster youth, parents with young children, older people, the reentry population, and non-custodial parents, to name a few. So there's a real potential here to think about the needs of those populations and how SNAP E&T can fit. And finally, there is an opportunity to consider how SNAP E&T can be used as a tool to advance equity and economic mobility, as well as 2-gen approaches. So what we overwhelmingly have heard from our state and local members is that there is a desire to advance programs that are equitable, that think critically about how race equity is put at the center of programs, and really serve communities in the best way possible. And so there's an opportunity in becoming a partner in SNAP E&T to also be a part of that process as well. And I know from our work with ACCT that these are also really important values for community colleges. So I'm going to pause there. I went a tiny bit over my 5 minutes, so hopefully that's okay. But I'm really, really excited to hand this over to Susan, who can dive into the nuts and bolts of SNAP employment and training. And really, I hope that my words have given a little bit of color to what Susan will share with you.
Thank you, Mary. So I'll just quickly introduce myself again. I'm Susan O'Callahan. I am a senior consultant with Seattle Jobs Initiative. And as Mary mentioned, we do have the privilege of working with Mary and her team on the National Partnership Grant. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to start sharing some information about SNAP E&T, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of this program. Okay. Oops. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. So I'll just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to give an overview of SNAP E&T. This might be a review for some of you, and this might be new information for others. So all states are required to operate SNAP E&T programs. And with that, they must submit an annual SNAP E&T plan up to the USDA. To give you a sense of sort of the size of the program, in fiscal year 2020, the USDA provided around $550 million, and that's in combined 100% and 50% reimbursement funds. We'll talk more about that later. But those go out to states to operate their SNAP E&T programs. Also in fiscal year 2020, SNAP E&T served just under 300,000 participants. So states have a lot of flexibility in how they operate their SNAP E&T programs, who they partner with, and what services and types of participants they prioritize to serve. So I talked a little bit about the state plan. State plans are a requirement for every state to submit to share and what their program is going to be. So they include their vision for SNAP E&T, what type of growth they plan to have in that year, who they're partnering with. We'll use the term third-party partners throughout this presentation. So who they're contracting with, that could be colleges, workforce agencies, community-based organizations. They also have to articulate how they've coordinated and consulted with the workforce system in their state, including colleges and CBOs. And then what types of components they offer. So components are the SNAP E&T services and activities. SNAP E&T operates on the federal fiscal year, which is October through September. Partners typically submit what they plan to do in their contracts around June. So this is helpful information just for those of you who are partners or potential partners. And then states have to submit their plans by the middle of August. So that just gives you a sense of the timeline. There are other things that when we're talking to partners or potential partners to consider, states do have the option to amend their plans and need to when they have significant changes in their budget or changes in their partnerships or activities that they're offering. So this just kind of gives you a sense of how this program is administered. So it's a program within the SNAP program, but it is administered and operated by states. And then they partner with the workforce development system in their state. So that could include community-based organizations, colleges, workforce agencies, and other workforce partners. But ultimately, states are responsible for administering this program, and they are the decision makers for how the program is structured. So who is eligible for SNAP E&T? SNAP E&T is there to serve SNAP recipients who are receiving SNAP in the month that they participate in the SNAP E&T activity. They are SNAP recipients who are not receiving a TAN of cash, and those who are able to work upon program completion. There are no participation limits, time limits in SNAP E&T, and states, again, they have a lot of flexibility in how they operate their programs. They can be mandatory or voluntary, which means that a state can make SNAP E&T a requirement for participating in SNAP altogether, or they can make SNAP E&T open to any of their SNAP recipients. So Mary mentioned the funding, and so this I'm going to describe more the types of funding that are available through SNAP E&T. So we talk a lot about 100% funds and 50-50 funds. The 100% funds are funds that come from the USDA. They come out to states to operate their SNAP E&T programs. But then there's also this funding stream that we call 50-50 funds. And those are where there's real opportunity for programs to grow in capacity and to reach more SNAP participants. And so I'll talk more about the characteristics of both of those funding streams. So 100% funds, they are formula-based. They go out to states based on their SNAP population. They're capped, and they are available to cover staffing and overall planning, direct program expenses, and just the overall operation of the program. But they can't cover other types of services, support services, and other things that are available through SNAP E&T. So there's a limit in several different ways for these funds. They're capped, and they can't cover all of the aspects of SNAP E&T. 50-50 reimbursement funds, on the other hand, have a lot more flexibility. They can cover all the things that 100% funds can cover, direct program expenses, and tuition and fees, but they can also cover support services, which in SNAP E&T we call participant reimbursements. And those are services such as childcare and transportation, which can really be critical for folks who have those needs, and those needs can be a barrier for them participating. Some key characteristics of 50-50 reimbursement funds is that the reimbursement, so these funds come to states and their providers after there's been a non-federal investment up front. So In order to draw in 50-50 reimbursement funds, a state and or a provider must use non-federal funds to cover those services and activities. And then they can claim those expenses to draw down federal reimbursement. One also just additional characteristic is that these reimbursement funds that come back, they lose their federal status once they come back to the provider, so they can be used to expand and enhance the program, and then can also be considered revenue that can draw down further reimbursement. So this is really where we see opportunity for growth in this program. If you can imagine all the different sources of non-federal investment that could then grow the capacity of your program. So the way this is often, where this opportunity really exists often is through third-party partnerships. So what that means is when the state is partnering with their workforce system in the state, with different providers who are contracted with the SNAP agency to provide SNAP E&T services. So a key third-party partnership could be colleges who can be reimbursed up to 50% with their non-federal investments. So if they're using non-federal dollars for E&T activities, they can get reimbursed 50% on those expenses. And this is kind of how that reimbursement model looks. So again, we talked about the state plan. That will include all of the third-party partnerships that the state has, all the contracts that they have for E&T services. They submit that and have it approved annually. As the providers are offering those services and using non-federal funds to pay for them, they then submit an invoice or a claim back up to the state agency, who can then pass through that reimbursement as those expenses are incurred. So I've talked about, or I mentioned components earlier, and again, that just means the services and activities allowed within SNAP E&T. Here is a list of those various components. One thing to note about SNAP E&T activities is that there's a requirement and an expectation that these activities are offered in conjunction with case management and support. So that is something that needs to be integrated throughout all these different activities. But this is sort of the menu of activities that states can opt into. So states have the discretion on which of these SNAP E&T activities, or all of them, they want to offer in their SNAP E&T programs. So when we're talking about college partnerships, some of these stand out as important activities that are offered through colleges. Education, obviously, work experience, work-based learning, and then also added support, perhaps like job retention and supervised job search. So the other important element of SNAP E&T is what we call participant reimbursements or support services. And these are services that are considered reasonably necessary and directly related to participating in a SNAP E&T program. So these are those things, again, that if these needs stand as barriers for a participant to complete and participate in their activities, they can be offered through SNAP E&T, and when they're covered by non-federal funds, they can draw down reimbursement. So some key examples are dependent care, transportation is a really important one, but also books and supplies, clothing and uniforms, other items that are necessary for a participant to complete their SNAP E&T activities. So we talked kind of a high level about SNAP E&T eligibility. I wanted to talk a little bit about student SNAP eligibility and SNAP E&T eligibility. So for students who meet the SNAP eligibility requirements, so if they're low income, they can be eligible for SNAP if they are going to school through a SNAP E&T program. So SNAP E&T participation kind of allows them to be eligible for SNAP. If a student would otherwise be ineligible for SNAP because of being in school, if they're participating in E&T, they can actually, they are then eligible for SNAP. And currently the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 expands SNAP eligibility to students. For those who are eligible to participate in work study during the school year, they aren't actually required to participate in work study, so that eligibility extends to them. And then also it expands SNAP eligibility to students who receive the expected family contribution of 0. So these are obviously temporary exemptions that will be in effect as long as there's a nationwide COVID public health emergency. I left the link to student SNAP eligibility on the USDA website that you can go to get more information about this. So community colleges and SNAP E&T, we're talking about how there's sort of a natural alignment, and they can be really important partners in a state SNAP E&T program. And that's because they are the entities that often offer connections to the labor market. They're offering career pathways opportunities. They have opportunities to bridge, pre-college level students to college level training. They're offering apprenticeships and other integrated learning models. So there's just really a natural alignment for the role that community colleges can play in SNAP E&T. Specifically, this is kind of what those roles can look like. SNAP E&T partnerships, states can partner with an entire college system in their state where that sort of governing entity acts as an intermediary who then has contracts with all of their states. And this intermediary model can be really beneficial to states because of the administrative capacity. If you can imagine, so in my home state, Washington, we have 33 or 34 community and technical colleges that roll up into one contract with their state board for community and technical colleges that state board then holds with the state SNAP agency. But community colleges can also contract directly with their SNAP agency. They don't need to be part of an intermediary model. So either model can work. It really depends on the state's capacity and interest potentially in operating with an intermediary entity. And some state agencies use some of those 100% funds to kind of offset the administrative burden that the intermediary is taking on to have this umbrella contract. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just what makes a good SNAP E&T partner. And this is true for colleges as well as other organizations who are considering whether they might be a good SNAP E&T provider. So we have been using this Venn diagram for quite a while when we do consulting on SNAP E&T, because it really clearly shows just these 4 different important elements, and where they sort of overlap is where we see kind of the best opportunity for a SNAP E&T provider. So you're serving eligible participants in your community. You have some administrative and capacity to operate the program. You're using non-federal funds to provide these aligned services. And then again, your services, the things that you're offering are aligned with what SNAP E&T offers, those SNAP E&T components. So I'm going to go in and talk a little bit about colleges specifically and how they align. So colleges, again, just kind of naturally align in what they have to offer with SNAP E&T. So this just kind of breaks down the potential available support services that they could offer, their ability to offer advising and perhaps enhance that level of advising and case management to SNAP E&T students. But ultimately, it's, you know, the fact that their programs that they offer are well aligned with SNAP E&T. And that includes, you know, adult basic education, short-term training opportunities, and basic skills and vocational training. So again, you know, college students are that are eligible for SNAP E&T, this can be a really big opportunity for students who might be starting at pre-college level training, may have had a negative past experience with the education system and need additional support to complete training. So there's a big opportunity for colleges to kind of expand who they consider a traditional student, and they can use SNAP E&T to just reach further into their community and provide these opportunities for people in their community who need them. And, you know, that going back to that Venn diagram, and we talk about capacity. So there is capacity that's needed to operate SNAP E&T. So this is just kind of describes some of that capacity. So the ability to document supportive services, to manage federal funds, you know, go through audits and monitoring, budgeting and invoicing, data and reporting capacity, the ability to track, assess students and develop employment plans. That's a key activity and aspect in SNAP E&T, tracking the progress, tracking the participation in the different components, and then tracking outcomes. So these are things that colleges are often doing that can really, SNAP E&T requirements can sort of be incorporated into what colleges are already doing. And that's typically how we like to sort of present that, where you're not necessarily having to create a whole new operation within your college. You can really integrate these things into what you're already doing, perhaps with other programs. Non-federal funds. So these are some examples of different often state level funds that colleges tap into to then draw down reimbursement. And these are where, you know, states have kind of an opportunity to think about how they want to invest in community colleges and create sort of these capacity growing revenue streams. These are just some examples. Another example that I have been talking about with my colleagues recently was gap funding that we know is used in some states where they're using lottery money to provide college tuition for low-income students. So there's a lot of ways that states can think about investing in their community colleges that can really be an opportunity to even go further with the 50-50 model. So Pell Grants, there's SNAP E&T can be used sort of in conjunction with Pell Grants. They can bridge, be sort of a bridge to Pell Grants. They can cover activities that Pell doesn't currently cover, or can even be utilized when a student is waiting to be approved for Pell. They can't replace Pell. SNAP E&T can't supplant other federal funding streams. So you have to be thoughtful about how you integrate SNAP E&T, but it can help you increase your capacity. And then it can cover things that Pell can't cover. So while a student is receiving Pell, it can cover those additional supportive services for SNAP E&T students. So this is sort of the end of my presentation. I wanted to offer a few resources. A lot of the information that I provided in these slides is from the SNAP E&T program toolkit, and it's linked here. Additionally, there are tools and resources on the SNAP to Skills website. SJI has been part of the SNAP to Skills effort for several years, where states are receiving technical assistance in a variety of ways to build out their SNAP E&T programs. So these are some helpful links if you want to learn more about opportunities of SNAP E&T. And then just a little bit more about Seattle Jobs Initiative. So we offer a variety of consulting in SNAP E&T. We also consult with our student-centered design department, where we are providing colleges and their partners support to close equity gaps and engage the student voice in improving their programs. SNAP E&T is often a key focus in that work that we do. We use a behavioral science and human-centered design approach to work with colleges on that. So if you want more information about how Seattle Jobs Initiative has been involved in this work for several years, I've offered links there. And if I have time, I will take any questions. I'll look at the chat as well.
Yeah, we've got quite a few coming in. Thank you so much, Susan. Mary, did you want to, I see you opening up. Did you want to add anything at the end, or do you want me to go to questions?
No, I'm happy, and I've been kind of answering a few questions from my perspective in the chat, but I'm happy to support questions along with Susan.
Awesome. So I am going to start with a more general one we received, and then go into some of the more specific ones. Someone who would describe themselves as a beginner to SNAP E&T asked, what would a typical qualifying student profile look like? And I know that's probably a hard question to ask. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about what types of students profiles usually qualify.
Yeah, well, I think, going back to just the general eligibility requirements, students who are low income and who need skills to enter the workforce. So students who are going to community college to build their employment skills, who are participating in, employment focused curriculum. It really is that broad, but I also think that colleges can be more targeted in reaching students that don't see themselves as a traditional college student. So sometimes that means students who are older, students who don't see themselves as being able to complete college. SNAP E&T offers these added layers of support that can help them persist through those programs. So, it really is any low-income student who needs and is interested in participating in an employment training program.
Great. And then Mary spoke a little bit to this question, but just if you guys want to elaborate, there was a question about if there are parameters around coverage of transportation or other support services, like how directly do those need to be linked to seeking employment or getting education and training?
They need to be directly linked so that, they are, it's when a student needs, when sort of that need is a barrier for them to be able to do what they need to do. So if they need transportation to get to their training site, that's a service that you can offer them and then get reimbursed for those 50% for those expenses. And in fact, and I won't get too deep into policy around this, but states are required to make sure that students or SNAP E&T participants have those services available so that they can participate. They can't, the participation, if participation hinges on having those things available, the state needs to require that. And so their partners can sort of help in meeting that requirement by offering those services. but they do have to be, reasonably and tied to that activity. And they have to just they use this reasonable and necessary standard to sort of give guidelines around, when they're allowable and what's eligible.
Great. And then we got a question about what is typically the responsibility of the state board? We did hear someone else in the chat responded that, for example, in Washington state, the state board is the intermediary for SNAP E&T and provides guidance. But if you want to speak to that a little more broadly.
Yeah, it really depends on the relationship that the state SNAP agency establishes. So it could be where they are a true intermediary, where they are, serving in some capacity to ensure that the colleges are in compliance. Still the state agency ultimately holds the responsibility of ensuring program compliance, but they can really, use that intermediary to sort of collectively monitor that and add in their capacity to operate. But then in other states, they have kind of they use their the state boards or whatever they're called in a maybe a lighter touch way, just as a more of a convener. It really depends on the relationship. And then again, other colleges contract directly up with the state and don't involve their state boards.
I think, Susan, another thing to kind of add, and it took me a little while to get this, is we hear this word intermediary all the time as if it's really like some sort of formal structure that exists in SNAP E&T, but really it's not. And this kind of goes back to this idea that there really is a lot of latitude to create structures within your state that work for your state. And there are even some community, and you may have mentioned this, Susan, I didn't, and I didn't hear it, but there are community colleges that act as the intermediary for other community colleges within the state. So these structures can look very different depending on your state and an organization's capacity to develop contract schemes, and the responsibility of what we call an intermediary, which is really just a contractor between, is really just dependent on the needs of the state and the capacity of that organization. So this kind of goes back to that idea of there really is an opportunity to make this program into what works for your state and your organizations and your community.
Yeah. Thanks, Mary. That's helpful. Yeah, we talk about intermediary all the time as if it's this defined thing, and it really is. It's a fairly loose concept that is applicable in a lot of different ways.
Great. And then we got a question about if you have any examples or thoughts on what works best with community colleges when it comes to mandatory or voluntary programs.
I think in mandatory programs, the key is that the states really have to be able to offer, services in order for their SNAP participants to, comply with that mandatory participation. So, I guess colleges are a great partner and an opportunity for some of their participants. And I think the wider array of opportunities that a mandatory program can offer, the better their SNAP participants are going to be able to meet those compliance requirements. From the college perspective, for them, they can function regardless. I think where the college is going to sort of experience the difference in a mandatory versus voluntary setting is perhaps the referral relationship they have with the state agency, perhaps they might have they might be getting more referrals from a state SNAP agency, but honestly, I don't think that there's a huge difference from my perspective and operationally for a college.
Yeah, I think that's Right. And I thought this was a really interesting question too. And I just wanted to add in my 2 cents too of a couple of thoughts is that if you're operating in a mandatory state, that doesn't mean that voluntary participants are not allowed to participate. So you could have volunteers. So perhaps in most states anyway, there's an opportunity to kind of think about who's not mandatory that may want to participate. And that kind of goes back to that thinking about populations that we sometimes don't think about. There's been a real shift in thinking about transition age foster youth. And within that population, young parents. So, don't think that if you're in a mandatory state, you're kind of siloed to only the mandatory population. And then the other thing I'll say is we have really noticed that for mandatory participants, well, and really for anyone, the key is meaningful options. So we sometimes kind of think about this in a sentiment of compliance, like, oh, this individual needs to participate, so we just need to find a way for them to participate. But you can also think about, well, if we know who mandatory participants are, oftentimes young adults, and we think about the kinds of opportunities that are really going to resonate with them and ask them, what are the kinds of things that you'd like to do and what are your objectives and goals? I think there's a real opportunity to think not about compliance, but about long-term economic mobility and supporting these individuals in a real career pathway. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, I think that's well put, Mary.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Mary. So on the funding side, obviously a lot of folks, want to know, okay, exactly, would this count to get the reimbursement? So we had a question, would state-funded financial aid programs, so not federal financial aid programs, be acceptable as tools for covering the cost of attendance and seeking reimbursement?
I mean, largely, yes. There are certain, kind of caveats to that, I guess, in the way the funds get to the college and support that student. But largely, yeah, that's where the opportunity is. That's where a lot of opportunity is for colleges to leverage their funding streams.
Great. Then we had a question about individuals who are returning citizens. How do they access SNAP funds, E&T funds and services, and do they have to be enrolled in a higher education institution?
Returning citizens, if they're eligible for SNAP, then they're able to work. So going back to that original eligibility criteria, can be eligible for SNAP E&T. And then again, it's if they have colleges who are SNAP E&T providers, that's an opportunity for them. So, I mean, I think that's, I know there are a lot of SNAP E&T providers that are focused on the reentry population and might be good sort of conduits to then connect reentry. Typically, I've seen a lot of programs that offer kind of short-term training because there's some pretty urgent needs often of folks who are just returning from incarceration. So like of kind of a quick employment opportunity is really critical for them. But then when they're linking them to sort of, longer term or just higher skilled training opportunities and connecting them to the college system can be a really important sort of next step for a returning citizen. But as long as they're eligible for SNAP, then the opportunity, hopefully when they're available is the same for others.
Yeah, and I think, and this was a question I think that came up in the chat too, just to clarify that it's not any provider that offers a qualifying employment and training services program can be a provider. It's not limited to community colleges. So, that could be community-based organizations like family resource centers or community action agencies or organizations like Goodwills or United Ways are commonly providers as well. And there's also opportunities for you all to partner as community colleges with those community-based organizations to create an array of services. So just a flag, I know this is a session that's really targeted towards higher education, but the spectrum of providers is broader than that.
Yeah, that my experience in particular, I come from a social enterprise. That's where I have a lot of my experience in SNAP E&T. We are a culinary social enterprise in Seattle, and then Seattle Jobs Initiative has local programming as well. And we partner with other community-based organizations as well as the college system to give people access to training opportunities. And so again, yeah, you can share sort of the contribution. One provider can offer a certain array of components, and then another one can offer a different array and serve that same individual.
Great. So yeah, we got a couple questions about like engaging CBOs or adult schools. I know Mary had answered, I think, one of them in the chat, but those could be great partners and providers as well, in addition to higher ed. We had a question about which states are drawing down the largest amount of 50-50 funds. If you maybe want to highlight a few that are.
Well, I come from Washington State, which I know draws down has a huge number of third-party partners. I haven't looked at numbers recently, but I would be willing to bet that Washington is high up there on the list. We have around 60 community-based organizations and workforce agencies, and then all 34 of our community and technical colleges are SNAP E&T partners. So that I know that state's annual SNAP E&T budget is pretty high. And I regret that I do not have those numbers right offhand, but other states are growing their programs too, and are getting up there too. California is growing its program. Gosh, Mary, help me out here.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's their their Fresh Success program.
Fresh Success, yeah. They also just started a pilot in LA County, which is massive, a massive county. They hope to really grow with that.
Yep, and we just got information from Oregon as
Yes.
well in the chat. For those of state teams, we'll be hearing a case study on them tomorrow. So we got a few questions also about, this all sounds great. How does the process begin? Who needs to initiate kind of the steps to start getting these funding sources aligned, contracts signed, that sort of thing?
Mary, and we were just talking about this a few minutes before this session. So, I think that if, specifically colleges, if they're interested, I think looking to their network, if they do sort of operate under an umbrella and a board, to be sort of thinking strategically about assessing, kind of looking internally about how they might align. And then, understanding, we always talk about then you sort of next step is to kind of understand the environment and the state that you're in and understand what that state's priorities are and whether they're ready to take on new partners and what types of partners they're looking for, or what populations they're targeting. So kind of doing a feasibility and an alignment assessment. And then it can really start with just having a conversation with your state SNAP agency and understanding what they're interested in exploring in the way of a partnership. And some states are very clear about how and when they bring on new partners. And so it can be simply just understanding that and doing this sort of internal feasibility assessment, and then applying and submitting a proposal through their RFP process. But often you really want to start just having those partnership conversations. And often, they're already partnering potentially with the state in other programs and other areas. And so really trying to leverage those relationships that exist already, and just starting to engage and really understand what their priorities are, what their capacity is, and trying to align yourself that way. And, we always say, start small, think about it, on a small scale. What's sort of your obvious, maybe really, immediate opportunity. And then you can start there and really then work towards building up your capacity and growing.
Great. So I think we have time for 1 to 2 more questions. I have one already here, but if anyone has a final one, go ahead and enter it in the chat. We got a question about, are there specific requirements for an educational program to qualify for SNAP E&T?
Yeah, they really have to be employment, centered and vocational in nature. So they really have to be kind of part of a process to that will lead, to employment and shows like a direct connection to an employment outcome. So states kind of work within, their partnerships to really kind of approve what pathways and offerings that their colleges have to do that. So you can't go in and say, I'm going to, develop my own, curriculum and course list and say I want a job through this. It has to sort of be an acknowledged kind of pathway to that's vocational in nature. But it's broad beyond that, and it's more broad than, say, like WIOA programs, who it's a little bit more narrow in what types of opportunities they can connect their participants with.
And then we got one final questions about if 50/50 funds could be in kind donation.
With third-party providers, no, but if you are a government agency, there are opportunities. That's some sort of finer policy information that I would say look to the SNAP E&T toolkit, and perhaps talk to, if you have opportunity to ask questions to FNS. There are ways, opportunities with that, but it's limited and restricted to government entities.
Awesome. Well, with that, we're right on time. Thank you so much, Susan and Mary. If you do have time and ability, we'd love for you to stick around. We're sure that there will be other questions or discussion in the chat that you guys would be able to weigh in on. But thank you so much. This has been really illuminating and a great foundation for the rest of the content today, as well as those who are joining tomorrow. So thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'll type my email into the chat. I'll also share my slides. So if you want to share those out.
Yes, we did get requests to share the slides. So if you could send those to me, I'll make sure the attendees get them.
Will do. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. And then if you want to, yep. Okay, so now we're going to hear, we've done a lot of policy conversation now, but I think it's always really helpful to ground ourselves in what's really happening on the ground, and a reminder of why these programs are important. Why do we want to support them? Why do we want to support the people that are attending them and getting education and training from them, et cetera. So now we're going to hear from a local provider in Boise, Idaho. We're going to hear from Rebecca Wilkie. She's the Economic Empowerment Manager at IRC, International Rescue Committee, Idaho and Boise. She's had several years of serving refugee and immigrant populations in the US and Italy, as well as in workforce training and development, nonprofit, education, et cetera. And she oversees this work at IRC Boise, including financial capabilities, workforce development, career programs, wellness, digital literacy, and other projects and initiatives. So with that, Rebecca, I'm going to ask you to come off mute, and I am going to share your slides to go through this.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's wonderful to hear about all of the different introductions that we've had so far to SNAP E&T. And I just wanted to emphasize the individuals pictured here on this first slide. They are really incredible examples of going from SNAP to skills, right? Going from being on food stamps to doing these education and training programs, and then career laddering up to different opportunities. And pictured here are refugees who resettled in Boise. And if you go to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit more about their journey and kind of who they are. So predominantly, we have had in the last 4 to 6 years, refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo. You can see Congo and Democratic Republic of Congo are largely represented among the population that we serve. And then for the female clients that we serve and the male clients that we serve, they're kind of from different geographic regions as well. There's also varying age dynamics among our different components. We have 3 different SNAP E&T components, and essentially each of them has kind of different breakdowns, but this is just a general at a glance view of who the refugees are that we're serving in our SNAP E&T programs. The average age is about 35 of individuals across our programs that we serve. If you want to go to the next slide. And so we've had a partnership with SNAP E&T in Boise and Idaho since 2019 in the summer. We started with these local conversations. We have all these training programs. We're helping people get job ready through vocational English, through digital literacy, through career laddering programs, and even a wellness program now. And so we said, let's start a partnership. And we did the assessment and moved forward. And you can see here one of the participants in our training program, a vocational sewing program. If you go to the next slide, please. And so our services across our IRC SNAP E&T programs all include IRC case management. We really follow closely the progress of the individuals enrolled. We bundle services, and we make sure that barriers to education, like challenges with childcare and transportation, that those are removed as much as we can help with that. And then we also enroll in other opportunities, other programs outside of IRC. And then, of course, you guys are probably familiar with the reimbursable expenses that we help our clients get tools if they do construction or other kind of labor, work clothes, class materials, even tuition, all through SNAP E&T have been reimbursed. And then transportation to class or work. We have, people doing our program who they are working 2 jobs and then they're coming to a class in the evenings, or they're brand new in the country and they're doing 16 hours a week in class, and we always help with transportation. And then we also refer to our state workforce agency, Maximus, and they refer to us, and they provide further support for ongoing transportation and childcare needs. Next slide, please. So these are our reimbursed programs through SNAP E&T. We have a Spark vocational English and wellness class, and that's often integrated with digital literacy, but it is a separate component. We provide digital literacy coaching to newly arrived clients and also to career pathways clients who've been here much longer. And we have served about 165 SNAP eligible clients between these 3 program components. You can see there's kind of different reimbursement average rates. For Spark, they get about an 86% reimbursement rate because they're serving individuals who are in their first 6 to 8 months in the country. Almost all of them are on food stamps initially, and then are placed into jobs as they leave their refugee cash assistance programs and this vocational English program and wellness program. And then our digital literacy program is a mix of both longer term clients who've been here, 2-3 years, but also these more newly arrived. And then our career pathways clients has a lower reimbursement rate because we do have people who have been here a lot longer, who already have higher wages, and not all of them qualify for SNAP. So if you go to the next slide, please. So you can see here pictured our vocational English and self-reliance and wellness class, and they're practicing basic writing skills. Some of the students come with very little education, formal education, and so even the skills from writing with a pencil and all the way up to just work readiness and vocational English for the job is very important in this class. A lot of these students end up working in hospitality, in custodial right away, because they do have just a brief window of 6 months to really get their feet on the ground, get that job. And so it's really a wonderful program to help them prepare. If you go to the next slide, please. And it's integrated programming. So we have, our conversational English, our workplace language, everything mixed in with American cultural orientation. and then also our wellness program. So you can see here that people who are in their first 6 months in the country attend 12 hours of vocational English per week, as well as 3 hours of wellness programming where they discuss, stress, conflict management. They're going through so many changes and lots of different cultural changes as well. And so they're really getting a lot of, support. And then we also do 5 to 20 hours of digital literacy coaching in their first 90 days in the country. If you go to the next slide, please. I just want to share some of the outcomes. So 92% of our students improved English levels. Some of them come with very little English, some with much higher levels. And we always do assessments pre and post to make sure that we really are having positive outcomes and improving their situation. We had 30 job placements in 2021, and 89% of those job placements retained that job after 90 days. And then 1336 was the average hourly wage of the participants in our wellness and vocational English program. If you go to the next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about our career programs now. You can see all these individuals. It's 9 at night. They've just done a graduation after 3 months of doing Tuesday and Thursday classes after long shifts. Some of them even went to work in a graveyard shift right after the class, but they all engaged in this career program because they wanted to improve their circumstance and move from SNAP to skilled jobs. If you can go to the next slide, please. We have currently 3 career programs that are actively running. We have several others. We had about 6 different tracks, but it just depends on the season, what ones we're working on. So you can see our industrial sewing program. We've been working with a large number of individuals to train up 26 industrial sewers in this year, and the majority are in SNAP and are looking for jobs that can really be sustainable, and they can use the skills that they have pre-existing and sharpen those skills. We have a heavy equipment operator and CDL class, and then our EVS pre-apprenticeship class, which is essentially a hospital sanitation class that prepares individuals. And these individuals have been at the forefront of the fight against COVID in the hospitals, and they have really just shown how important their work is in sanitation and infection prevention. If you go to the next slide, please. So in just 2021, we had 23 students in our SNAP E&T partnership. They were enrolled participants that gained new credentials. 23 achieved career laddering job placements, and then they had an average hourly wage of $14.35. Many were unemployed after layoffs from kind of food processing or different sectors. And so we had a $7.25 wage gain because many people were coming off of unemployment. And anyway, it was really wonderful to see kind of these vocational programs pay off for them. If you go to the next slide, please. So our programs that I've mentioned are all predominantly funded by private grants. And then the reimbursement is substantial. It's like, we had one private grant. It's about the same amount. And so it's really been beneficial because we have all these outcomes we're trying to achieve through all of our private grants, and SNAP supports the admin. We have a lot that we do to keep these programs up and running, a lot of collaboration with community partners, community colleges. I saw a question about WIOA that I'll speak to in a minute on the question and answer slide. And so SNAP is really key to keeping our programs well administered. And it is, a lot of work to budget each year according to our different grants that come in, but there's such value in this program. Next slide, please, Rachel. I really wanted to say that the conversations that you were having in the last slide or in the last presentation about how to get this conversation started, for us, it just started by talking. Our state refugee agency said there's this program, and we started talking back and forth with the Department of Health and Welfare program coordinator, and we just got started. And we bring as a resettlement agency about 600 different individuals to our services each year, and a lot of those are SNAP eligible, and so we're constantly self-referring, and it's been absolutely wonderful to have the state agencies see the benefit of investing in refugee education and the benefits that they give to the economy as well. I'll leave the rest for question and answer, and I can start with, I guess, the question in the chat. Rachel, would you mind reading any questions that I missed?
Yep, I just see the one right now on if the Spark program is through WIOA Title II.
So it actually is not. We have all private funding through LDS Charities currently for that grant. We have a partner, College of Western Idaho, that is WIOA funded, and we refer students from this programming to our partners outside. But essentially, it's just all privately funded except for the SNAP reimbursement at the moment, because it's a really unique thing to take and teach people who are maybe non-literate in their native language how to be literate in English. And so there isn't quite that base level in the WIOA provided programs. And so we created it in-house in partnership with English Language Center in Boise. The occupational training, if you could read the full question, Rachel, and I'll answer.
Yes, is the occupational training done through the college or through a college?
So we partner with College of Western Idaho's ESL Career Pathways program to do a lot of the occupational training. Some of it we do in-house as well. So we also partner with the Department of Transportation in Idaho. So for the HEO and CDL training, that's with Department of Transportation. And we also do a lot of like English tutoring to help individuals pass the CDL permit test. So that's in-house tutoring that we do. We do a Manufacturing Works. Our EBS program is in partnership with the WIOA provider, the CWI ESL and Basic Skills program. And then, it just kind of depends on the track and their availability of English teachers. And right now they're trying to ramp up programs. So we've taken our industrial sewing program, instead of partnering with them, we've just gone at it on our own and done it in-house as well, with employer partners support. So it just really depends on the program.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, you mentioned that I think your main funding source is a philanthropic donation. Like, did you know that you were going to use that to get a E&T 50/50 or that kind of, can you talk a little bit more about kind of like the nascent stage of when you started implementing 50/50?
Of course. Yeah. So I mentioned that our economic empowerment programming is predominantly privately funded, almost entirely privately funded. And then our resettlement programming is federally funded. And we actually just, in conversation with we have a technical advisor at HQ level, and then our state Idaho office for refugees, there was just kind of the suggestion that, hey, this would be a benefit. You're doing these programs anyway. Why not see if you'd be a good provider and a good partner in SNAP E&T? And so we just had initial calls back and forth. My predecessor can speak more to those. I kind of came on right when we started implementing SNAP E&T in that fall. And so, it was just a lot of dialogue back and forth and just showcasing the programs that we had and doing the eligibility assessment and setting up our budget. And I will say that SNAP E&T budgeting, I don't know if it's the same in all states, but it is pretty onerous to really get that up and going. And so we really worked closely to make sure we had everything in place with our partners on the state level, and then with our finance department as well.
Great. And we just had one that kind of piggybacks on that. Do you talk to your philanthropic donors about how you leverage their investments, and does it help you raise funds from them, knowing that they're kind of going an extra mile for every dollar?
Absolutely. We all the time just talk about, the match that we're making with our other programs, and then how SNAP E&T further serves. And really, in a lot of our applications for other funding, we mentioned SNAP E&T and our state workforce agency Maximus as strong partners, because we're referring back and forth. We're making sure that services are as seamless as possible between the two. And it's a really big support in those applications. We just were awarded by our Workforce Development Council an innovation grant, in large part because of our partnership and just everything that we built up with other state agencies. And then Erica, if you want to.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just navigating the chat here. We had a question about kind of best practices to partner with organizations like yourself, or advice you would give to states about partnering with organizations, which I think Erica is also from IRC headquarters is responding to, but Rebecca, any other thoughts on that?
Let me just read through the full. response that she had said. Yeah, really doing a landscape assessment. Erica, I think, was a larger part of that than I was. If you'd want to come off mute, Erica, you could talk about it more when you speak later on. But I saw also the question about collecting outcome data. So we have an effort to outcome database that we use, and we track closely enrollments in different programs and across programs and referrals across programs, and just put all of our enrollment data in there, wage income data, even class attendance we can track. And so, it's really been wonderful to see the outcomes at a snapshot.
Great. And then I'd love to hear a little bit more too, like a lot of the programs you described are more short-term training programs. As you said, folks come here, they need to get into the field. And of course, I'm sure that improves their English skills as well, really getting out there. But do you partner with, like, if they want to take a step up in their career pathway, so to speak, community colleges and or help them along further in their careers?
Absolutely. So from our Spark English class, I can give an example. We had a student, we'll say Jonathan, not his real name, but he started out in that class, and then he started tutoring other students, and then he moved and transitioned as he left cash assistance into our career pathways program. And we worked on doing forklift certification with him, making sure that he got a job at a lumber yard, better than his custodial job. And then from there, we also worked with him on doing an intensive English program at our local university, Boise State. And from there, he's been able to transition into doing university courses for engineering. And we've kind of, referred him off to another organization, Global Talent, that works with refugees seeking university degrees. And it's been amazing to kind of follow his progress. And that's just an example of one individual over the course of 2 years, kind of the different steps that he took to advance. Our programs, again, are kind of short-term vocational tracks, usually 2 to 3 months for the actual vocational training programs. And then we do continue to provide, kind of support in job search and career laddering once they do enter in our EVS program, which is the hospital sanitation program. We work really closely with those individuals to then career ladder up to be CNAs, or some have wanted to do, kind of radiology tech or record specialist positions. And so, we keep following along closely with them to support and do refer to our community college classes. And then they kind of go from there. And really, I would just note that all of the individuals who would participate in our programs and do kind of advance that way and do longer term programming are very motivated and just keep coming back. And we do outreach, to see if we can help every 6 months or so in progressing in the career ladder. But it's really all, their efforts and desire.
Awesome. And then in closing, Erica, did you want to come off mute and extrapolate a little bit on the landscape assessment you were talking about?
Sure, I'm happy to weigh in just a little bit. Yeah, I think that one of the things that we certainly see, sorry, I realize I have no video. One of the things that we certainly see in looking across states that are interested in expanding their SNAP E&T programs and kind of how those work, particularly with community-based organizations, is really that in many cases, they need to start with kind of an assessment of, what are the community-based organizations that are doing this type of work? If the CBOs are offering workforce services, how are they funded? Are there opportunities for those programs to be folded into the state's overall SNAP E&T activities? I think in particular for certain types of populations, obviously, Rebecca, did such a lovely job of really explaining how all of the work that Boise is doing is serving refugee and immigrant and English language learner populations quite well. I know there were comments made earlier about, foster parents or those who are aging out of the foster care system and are now parents. Returning citizens and others. I think that in particular, that's often a really good opportunity to, take a look at the CBOs that are providing services to some of those harder to reach, harder to serve populations, and thinking about ways to kind of fold them into into the SNAP E&T program, in particular because a lot of times those populations might not quite show up at the door of a community college. And so if a state only has SNAP E&T programming or primarily has SNAP E&T programming through a community college, they might be missing on some opportunities to engage some of these other populations that could also benefit from services.
Thanks so much, Erica. Awesome, and thanks so much, Rebecca. Really appreciate you joining us and sharing a bit about this program. Sounds great.
All right, everyone. I am not going to be the one who throws us off schedule, so we are starting right back up at 3:40 as promised. As a reminder, I'm Amanda Winters from the National Governors Association, and welcome back from the break. So it's time to hear from our federal partner. We are so pleased to welcome Rachel Gregg from the SNAP Office of Employment and Training at the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service, or FNS. I have the pleasure of engaging her in an armchair discussion. We want to pull in as many questions from the audience as possible. You all have been super engaged so far, so we're excited to see the questions keep rolling in for this portion of the agenda as well. So utilize the chat while we're talking. And I'll be sure to get all of those questions in front of her. If there's any questions we don't have time to cover during the armchair, we'll gather them all up and work with Rachel and her team to provide some responses or resources that can answer your questions and send them out in follow-up to attendees. Also, for ease of viewing, we are going to pull down the slide here in just a second. And if you want to click up into your view for speaker view, that will help for you to just see me and Rachel and could just focus on us during the discussion. So let's go ahead and jump in. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. We are thrilled to have you.
Thanks for inviting me. It's amazing to hear people talking about SNAP E&T like it's a real thing. So that's awesome. That's really great.
Well, great. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to start with hopefully a softball for you. And to sort of set the groundwork for everybody understanding what FNS does. So could you give us an overview of the priorities and programs that fall under FNS?
Sure. So FNS, the Food and Nutrition Service, clearly the mission of our agency is to make sure people have access to food. We do that in a lot of ways. The largest program is the SNAP program, so the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which used to be called food stamps. But that's just the program everybody knows, where people who meet certain requirements can get now an EBT card that allows them to purchase food. We have other programs though, the school lunch program, the WIC program, the TFAP, which is an emergency food program, works with food banks, school breakfast. So really, if you think about, for the most part, if you think about a federal nutrition program, it is probably inside of the Food and Nutrition Service. Most of our programs are operated by states, but we are the agency that oversees those programs. SNAP E&T, the program that I work on, is part of the SNAP program. So within SNAP, which is a nutrition program, there's a little tiny employment and training program it's important that people understand this. SNAP E&T, while it is an employment and training program, it is tethered to SNAP. So it is not a standalone workforce development program. It is not bubbled off inside of FNS or inside of USDA, though the program exists because it is, if you look in the act that authorizes the food stamp program, SNAP program, there are work requirements for some people who get SNAP, and SNAP E&T is one of those work requirements. And that's where you get that idea of a mandatory and a voluntary program. If a state chooses to, they can require people as a condition of eligibility for SNAP to participate in SNAP E&T. States can also, though, choose to exempt everybody from that work requirement, which is how you create a voluntary program. Some states operate, we have very few states that are operating mandatory programs anymore. We have a few states that are operating mandatory and voluntary, but most of our states are voluntary programs now. But it's really important, E&T starts inside of SNAP. So people who are interested in doing this, I think it's important that you understand that, because I come from a workforce development background, and I was like, this is an amazing program. I'm just going to go grab it up and do exactly what I want with it. And then I got here and I was like, oh, it looks that direction too. So SNAP E&T, it looks in the direction of SNAP and SNAP eligibility. E&T, it looks in the direction of workforce development.
Yeah, I think you're getting right to some of the questions that I had when I first started learning about SNAP E&T. And maybe you can help us navigate a couple of things we heard about a little bit earlier today too, about where SNAP E&T sits. Sort of, if you go to the FNS website and you click on some of these different things, you've got, SNAP to skills. You've got some of these things around SNAP referral. I wonder if you could help us understand how states can best leverage the variety of programs as they're thinking about SNAP E&T. How do they need to be thinking about some of these other FNS efforts, especially those that are related to skill development and credentialing as a part of sort of the food security picture?
Sure. So SNAP to Skills is OET. That is a program initiative that we created, and it is a technical assistance program initiative. I guess it's not really a program; it's a technical assistance initiative that we started. So it's all part of SNAP E&T. So there's a lot of things about SNAP E&T that you can think about. And it gets a little confusing because they all feel like SNAP to Skills feels like it might be something different than SNAP E&T, but it's an initiative that we started for technical assistance. We also have our national partnership grants and a bunch of other things. We have a lot of technical assistance going on. Because when we started this work, I came to FNS in 2007. When we started this work, I spent a lot of time early on, and actually I worked with us on this, where I would go to a state and I would say, do you know what SNAP E&T is? Do you know that you're operating a SNAP E&T program? Do you know what that program can do? And in general, people really didn't know. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean that as, most states had like maybe 1/4 of one FTE sort of shuffling the papers around for SNAP E&T. But it took a long time, I think, for FNS and for state agencies to understand that you could do more with SNAP E&T. It doesn't have to be mandatory, so it doesn't have to be punitive, and it doesn't have to be perfunctory, but there's really the capacity to do interesting, innovative things. So there's a lot to think about, sort of to connect inside of just E&T, but also to think about inside of SNAP too, right? So Susan mentioned this earlier. Individuals have to be on SNAP to participate in SNAP E&T. It's designed to serve SNAP recipients. So it's really important that if you want to be an E&T provider, that you first and foremost develop a relationship with the state SNAP agency. And you have to have that connection back to SNAP. So one of the things that's nice about E&T is, inherent in the DNA of the program is linking across agencies or programs or needs, really, because the Human Service Agency operates the program, but relies on the workforce side for that expertise about what does it mean to provide workforce development services. So it's really an opportunity to think sort of across agencies or across programs and try and take a more holistic view of how do we serve the needs of low income or low skilled individuals. There are other ways to think even more broadly, things to like child nutrition, school lunch. Families who are receiving child nutrition, school lunch, typically will qualify automatically for SNAP. Once they qualify for SNAP, they can participate in E&T. So there is actually, you can think even more broadly as a way to look at the needs of families, trying to understand if the children are receiving free or reduced lunch, generally, maybe their parents could be eligible for SNAP, which could make them eligible for SNAP E&T. So I know there's a lot of 2-gen work going on. There's a lot of thinking more, whole family strategies, and you can draw a line in both directions. How do we meet the needs of the children? E&T, one of the things that E&T can provide is childcare, but you can also go to the other direction, looking at what's happening with the children. Are there ways we can lift that up to help the needs of parents? So I think there's a lot of ways to think about connecting the connective tissue.
Now, this is great. And to have a federal partner talking about, innovation and connecting across systems is exactly what we love to hear. That's what we're always trying to help states do. So many times we hear from states that individual program funding streams or compliance and reporting requirements limit their innovation at the local level. So do you see opportunities that exist within FNS programs, building on what you were talking about around these intersectional opportunities, promote and incentivize the innovation and creative problem solving that would be needed to to best serve families?
Yeah. So I will acknowledge E&T is a complicated program. You have to build the infrastructure to operate an E&T program before you really start doing E&T. If you move into E&T too fast and you're just like, we're just going to do E&T, and you haven't built that infrastructure and you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get frustrated. I have seen providers come on with big plans. We're going to draw down $6 million in the first year and we're going to serve, 10,000 people. Never works. So it is complicated, right? And we do have restrictions on our funding. You can only serve individuals who are receiving SNAP. Well, that means that you have to figure out a way to know if they're on SNAP. You have to use a non-federal dollar in order to get reimbursed. Well, then that means you have to be able to track your dollars. You have to be able to show that we spend a non-federal dollar for these services. So there are things that you have to put in place to be able to do it. But then once that sort of infrastructure work is done, I think there's tremendous opportunity in E&T to innovate. We don't put a lot of restrictions on the types of services that providers can offer. We encourage our state SNAP agencies to really look at the community. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Our state SNAP agencies are experts in getting people food, not in workforce development. So we always say to our state agencies, look, there are lots of people in your state who know how to provide services to low income and low skilled people. They have relationships to employers. They're doing great things like career pathways and work-based learning and sector partnerships and bringing employers in early to help develop the curriculum so that it leads to industry recognized certificates or credentials. Like there's a lot of really cool stuff going on in your state. And what we would like to do is crack those services open for our clients. SNAP participants, low skilled, low income individuals typically fall through the cracks a little bit in traditional workforce development programs. So what we'd like to do is, we have this incentive with our reimbursement funds. We can say to people who are already doing good work in E&T, we can help expand your capacity. You're probably already serving people who are on SNAP or who could be on SNAP. You're already providing services that are gonna help them move to good, stable jobs. We have some money. If you're already making that investment, if you'll do this upfront work to become an E&T provider, we can start reimbursing you for the work that you're doing so that you can create capacity to serve SNAP participants. Particularly if you think about coming out an equitable recovery, right? Well, the people who are going to get left out of that recovery are the same people who were left out before if we don't do something different. So if you can build the capacity to reach down to people who have so little income that they qualify for SNAP, and you have to be poor to qualify for SNAP. It is not a luxurious program. So if you can find those people through community-based organizations that already are working in communities, through service providers who have cultural competency that's going to meet people where they are. That's the point of E&T, is to meet people where they are. We have reporting outcomes, but we don't have performance measures. So our reporting, you talked about outcome measures. We were very intentional. The act required us to create reporting measures that were based on the WIOA performance measures, but we were very intentional in creating reporting measures, not performance measures. So there's no fiscal penalty. You don't have to drive towards people who can get a job fast or at a high wage. We just want to create a baseline of information so we know where we are, what we're doing, but we understand that our clients are really going to need, in some cases, long-term, deep, expensive services. So, and I know there's a long answer, but we really want to see SNAP E&T as part of the workforce development system. We really think of it as part of a larger ecosystem, but that it can fill in cracks and gaps that low income and low skill people most typically fall through. And so if you think about innovation broadly, I really believe, I came to FNS because I really believe that this tiny little program can drive systems change. If you think about workforce development as linked across skills development and supportive services, human service needs, you can really change the way people experience skills development, right? So if we can pull it off, it's going to be big, but it's going to take some work.
Now, this is great. And we're seeing some questions pop up in the chat. So before I continue with my questions, I want to go ahead and jump over to a couple of those. One of them is one that I've been talking to Mary at APHSA about, and she's explained it to me a couple times. And I still don't fully get it. So I'd love to get your perspective on this, which is around
SNAP E&T takes a while. You have to hear it a handful of times at least.
Yeah, and I'm starting to get it. And with these expert voices today, it's starting to sink in. But this is a great question from Shannon. She says, talking about SNAP eligibility for students, you have to be receiving SNAP to be eligible for SNAP E&T services. How can being eligible for SNAP E&T gain access to SNAP for a student? So what's that handoff if somebody enters through a certain door and talking about eligibility for SNAP. In order to confirm eligibility for SNAP E&T, what do those processes look like?
Right. And I want to take one step back about student eligibility. So this is going to complicate it. Some of you may be SNAP experts and some of you may be workforce development experts. And I'm going to do like the thumbnail sketch of student eligibility. But if this is something somebody wants to talk more about, we can do that. It'll just take longer. So there are work requirements in SNAP, but if you're a full-time student, you are exempt from those work requirements. There's different work requirements though for students. There's something called student eligibility. So if you're a full-time student, it takes you out of our regular general SNAP work requirements, but it puts you into student eligibility. And if you're attending school more than half time, in order to qualify for SNAP, even if you're otherwise eligible for SNAP, in order to qualify for SNAP, you have to meet one of these other student eligibility requirements. So you have to be working part-time or have children, or there's a list of student eligibility exemptions. And if you don't meet one of those exemptions, you're not eligible for SNAP because you're a student going more than half time. E&T is one of the exemptions from the student eligibility rule. So if you are participating in E&T, you are a student, it makes sense that you would be allowed to stay on SNAP because in some cases, the state agency has referred you to the college to participate in SNAP E&T. So that would be crazy if we referred you to college and then you lost your eligibility for SNAP because we referred you to the college and you can't participate in E&T. And we just create this ridiculous comically cycle of on and off, on and off. So the state, if it's a direct referral, the state can refer somebody from the state agency to a college to participate in E&T. They're already eligible. They're referred to the college, they're allowed to participate because they are exempt from student eligibility rule. In a reverse referral, we do allow colleges, if somebody is enrolled in college and they're in a program that is otherwise an E&T program or the equivalent of an E&T program in some cases, we can sort of like almost retroactively, like we're not going to say you have to drop out of school, go get on SNAP, get reverted to SNAP E&T, and then come back to us. But you're in, we don't want you to drop out, you're on the right track. So we're going to go ahead and put you in E&T, and now you're an E&T participant, you're exempt from student enroll because you're participating in E&T, so you're okay for SNAP. Once you're on SNAP, you can participate. So it's like a little chicken and the egg-ish, but we have sort of figured out, go ahead and put them in SNAP E&T, and you're good to go if it's what we call a reverse referral.
Great. Yeah, that's the thing. The reverse referral is the thing I'm trying to nail down. Thank you. I think that made it a little bit more clear for me. Hopefully it did for Shannon, who had the question as well.
And I want to just say, because I work for federal agencies, I have to say it's a little more complicated than that. So don't just start dumping people into SNAP E&T and saying that they're okay for SNAP. Talk to your state agency, talk to your regional the state agency can talk to a regional office. We will help you figure it out.
Great. Do you have suggestions about when we're talking about this sort of, knowing who's eligible and who's currently receiving SNAP? Do you have suggestions for how colleges can figure out which students are receiving SNAP, the best way to connect that data so they can better serve those students?
Sure. So under the some of the COVID legislation, the most recent appropriations bill, they included a provision that says if a student has an EFC of 0, they can go on to SNAP. So it's really easy right now. That is temporary. There are people who are advocating to make it permanent, and so that may become permanent, but for right now, it's pretty easy. So if they have a 0 EFC, they can enroll in SNAP. We have done some work with the Department of Ed previously to try and link individuals who are applying for student financial aid to SNAP. But, it's going to take some effort. One of the things about community colleges that are interested in doing E&T, it's really important that your financial aid staff be involved in those conversations because that's where people are going to come in. But it does take some conversation. Like people are not wearing signs that say I'm on SNAP. There is some stigma in admitting you're on SNAP. There's a lot of student hunger. There's been a lot of focus on student hunger. There's a lot of student hunger on campus. Some campuses are starting food banks and other resources for people. I think it's safe to assume that those people are going to be SNAP eligible. If not on SNAP, they should be on SNAP, but if they're not, and that's where student eligibility gets complicated too. But E&T can be a way to help address that. So I think it does take a little bit of conversation, a little bit of work to do that, but I think the payback is worth it because it can really relieve a lot of student debt too.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to jump back to one of my questions, and then folks, please keep throwing your questions into the chat so we can get these in front of Rachel while we have her precious time today. So as a part of the application to have the state team times tomorrow, states submitted their completed state plans. However, we're hoping that this workshop and the things that they're learning and the conversations they're going to have in their state team times might inspire some innovative thinking or thinking about how they could adjust or enhance their current plans. Does FNS encourage plan adjustment? And if so, what would be the process for amending their current plans?
States can amend their plans at any time during the year. They just have to submit an amendment. Some states have different processes for doing that. So from FNS's perspective, a state can submit an amendment really at any time. If they go wait, so I don't expect this would happen with your project because we literally just started the new fiscal year. We have had some states that have submitted an amendment like in September when we're starting the new fiscal year in October. And we're like, okay, we're not even going to get to, we don't even have time to approve this before we start the new fiscal year. So sometimes we'll push back a little bit, but in general, a state can amend their plan at any time.
Now that's great. And do you usually have a back and forth with the state to discuss the amendment, or
Yes.
is it, okay, all right, just want to know what the process looked like.
I mean, we'll always come back with questions if we have them. We'll try and approve it within 30 days. States are required to amend. States cannot make a change to their program without our permission. So they have to amend their plan. You can't just bring on a new provider. You can't just start a whole new component. It has to be, anything a state does in its E&T program has to be in an approved state plan. So they have to amend their plan. We have to approve it. They have to submit an amendment at least 30 days before they start doing anything new. So they have to give us at least that long to look at what they're doing. But we we really see our states as partners with us. This is not our program. This is a state administered program. So we talk a lot to the states, and there'll be a lot of back and forth. And if we have questions, we'll ask them, and we'll also do our best to move forward as fast as we can.
Awesome. I know that we have some folks on this meeting who are deeply knowledgeable about SNAP, while others, and we took a little poll at the beginning, and a lot of people were beginners to thinking about SNAP E&T, and they might be approaching it from a post-secondary or workforce perspective. So you mentioned that like the SNAP to Skills is a technical assistance program. What types of supports does your office provide for some of the folks that are on this call if they want to afterwards reach out and access some of this, if they want to work more closely with your office? What does that interaction and that regular communication look like with your team?
Sure. So in general, FNS's relationship is with the state agency, and that's really typically where we stop. So as much as we can, we encourage, like if you're a college who is interested in working on E&T, to go through the state agency. And typically if you have questions, we say, send them up through the state agency, who send them to our regional office, who send them to us. But E&T is a little bit different than some of the other FNS programs, to the extent that a lot of our work is not just like with SNAP, it's really just operating a well-established program. A lot of our work is really talking to states about doing more with their program, and talking to providers and talking to other stakeholders about how can we create this capacity, doing a lot of education. So we have a contract. SJI is our contractor again this year. We just started a new contract for SNAP to Skills. We're doing SNAP to Skills a little bit differently this year, where instead of, in the past, we've worked with a handful of states and done deep technical assistance, where we spent a lot of time with them and really tried to build capacity with a few states. We have worked with many of our states, so we have sort of maxed out the states who need that deep technical assistance. And so this year and next year, our contract is a 2-year contract. So this year and next year, SNAP to Skills will be capacity for states that want help with like a small project. So we need to figure out the reverse referral process. We'll do like that'll be like a finite project that we will work on with the state through our technical assistance contractor, SJI. We can work with 30 states over 2 years, so 15 states a year. We're also going to do a state, we've done state academies in the past, not this year, but next year, I think we'll be doing another state academy where people can come and participate in the academy and learn a lot about E&T. Beyond SNAP to Skills though, so we have 7 FNS regions, or USDA, they're really USDA regions, but 7 FNS regions. And in each region, there's a SNAP E&T analyst, and their only job is to work with the states in their region to create new capacity in those states and to build stronger, more robust programs. So they can also be a technical assistance resource. I can see some of them. Brian Solomon is on the call and Jason Turner is on the call. But we can send you a slide that has the contact information for each region, what states are in each region. And they can often answer questions as well. I'm happy to give people my contact information. You're welcome to send me an email or call me as well. And we can start with some basic information. We're always at the end of the day going to push you back towards your state SNAP agency, because they're the ones who will make the final decision. You can talk to me for the next 25 years. And if your state doesn't want to do E&T, then you're not going to do E&T. So, but we can help facilitate some of those conversations as well. We also have our national partnership grantees. So APHSA is one of them, and they're working with ACCT and the community action agencies. Goodwill is a partner, is a grantee. REDIF, which is a social enterprise organization, is a grantee. And the National Association of Workforce Boards, NAB, is a grantee. So you might be able to work through them, because those grants are to create capacity within those national organizations to help their affiliate and member organizations learn about E&T. And if they want to become an E&T provider, they can do that. We can help them do that. So there's a lot of capacity. If you want to do E&T, we can help you do E&T. So we will get you there if that's something that you're interested in.
Yeah, definitely. That would be great. If you could share the slide with the contact for those regionals folks, we can send that out and follow up to the attendees.
Absolutely.
Great. So I have a couple of questions that are focused on sort of the right now, the recovery, the current hopefully recovery stance that we're in right now, and thinking about what role SNAP E&T can play. First of all, are you seeing many states, or are you working with many states who are committing ARPA funds to SNAP E&T? And if so, could you talk about what opportunities might exist within those funds to support standing up some or build up SNAP E&T opportunities?
Yeah, and I'm gonna ask Mary if she wants to comment on this too. We asked states to include in their state plans that they just submitted if they were going to do something with ARPA funds. We saw a few states, a handful of states, but not a ton. I'm not 100% sure that states actually know that ARPA funds can be used for SNAP E&T. We did put some guidance out to that effect. But I have a little bit of a sense that at least in some cases, states are still trying to figure out what to do with their ARPA funds. I think a big glug of money came down, and like it's going to take a little time to figure out how to spend all of it. States, though, if they decide they want to spend ARPA funds on E&T, they can, just like with anything else, they can amend their state plan and say, oh, hey, we figured out we have this money, we're going to spend it on E&T. It functions just like the state's 100% fund, so they can use it for the administrative costs of an E&T program. They can't use it for participant reimbursements, but they can use it to administer the programs or to provide cover tuition costs, which is an administrative cost in E&T. And Mary, I don't know if you've seen more states doing it. I did not see that many in the state plans.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that the sense is it's really been hard for states to figure out how to invest this money in ways that are smart, because they don't want to set up programming that's not sustainable. But right. I also think your sentiment that states might not be aware that they know they can use it for SNAP admin, but I don't know if they're connecting the dots that also means SNAP E&T admin. And I think that there are some strategies that states could think about. So for example, building out aligned case management systems for their E&T providers could be a really great investment here. So we're trying to spread the word, but I think your sense is right.
Yeah, no, and the point that you make, FNS is interested in states using these funds for IT needs. There are a tremendous amount of IT and tech and like programming needs for E&T that are a one-time investment. So if states are looking for funding to do that, this money can absolutely be used for this. And I see there's a question about, is there a list for what is allowable under E&T with ARPA funds and what isn't? They function like as 100% funds, which is the grant that states get from the federal government. And there's not sort of a list of yes, this or no, this. So E&T 100% funds can be used to cover any cost of operating the E&T program except participant reimbursements. The Food and Nutrition Act, which authorizes SNAP E&T, requires that states use 50-50 funds for participant reimbursements. And that's because we want to make sure that states have some skin in the game. So basically the ARPA funds can be used for any other E&T cost except participant reimbursements, which can only be done with 50-50 funds.
Great, thank you for that. Yes, we are also gathering up all of these links. Thank you, Mary, for throwing links into the chat. We're gathering all of these up Just so you know, if you miss some of them, folks, we are going to gather them and send them in follow-up from this meeting. So don't worry if you didn't catch something or if you aren't able to capture one of those links before you log off today. So I wanted to jump over to just sort of a broad question around recovery. So how can states think about SNAP E&T as part of an equitable recovery strategy? I know a lot of states are really thinking about reaching under-resourced communities. They're thinking about issues of racial equity. They're thinking about wraparound supports for workers and learners. Where do you see SNAP E&T fitting into that picture? What are the best sort of opportunities that you see for this playing a role in an equitable recovery?
Yes, I think SNAP E&T can sit right in the middle of that. I hope that it does. You know, states have a lot of flexibility in how they design their SNAP E&T programs. If you've seen one SNAP E&T program, you've seen one SNAP E&T program. Because states, you know, it's like a decision tree, right? And each decision that the state makes will drive it to other kinds of decisions. But states that want to can design an E&T, but they can choose the providers that they work with, and they can really be intentional about the kinds of providers that they work with. It's very exciting to me to see that Idaho, to see Rebecca's presentation about what they're doing in Idaho with a refugee population. Those are people who are not going to have easy access to E&T services and where you need culturally competent services for them. So for the state to find a provider who's already doing that and to say, hey, if you want to be a part of E&T, we can help expand your capacity. And it's great that they're all philanthropic donations, because every dollar they have then can be reimbursed with SNAP E&T. And the fact that it helps them with their administrative costs instead of their, you know, they have money for their program costs, for their service costs, but they needed help with their administrative costs. So that's smart. Really thought about, well, we can do this, but we need a little help with this. And so, but through E&T, it really lets them create capacity that they don't have the funds for otherwise. Is very exciting. So I think states can really think about what kind of providers they want to work with. And instead of sort of taking anybody who's willing to apply, which some of our states have, that's where they sort of got to, because E&T is hard and there weren't very many providers who wanted to be part of E&T. But I think many of our states are getting to the point where they can actually think about what kind of provider they want now. So you can really design an E&T program that is about reaching marginalized communities, communities of color, people who are not otherwise going to walk into a traditional employment and training provider, might walk into an organization that's in their local community. So you can look for those providers. And that's one way to reach people who we just aren't very good at reaching. The program is designed to serve people who are very low income, people who have not traditionally done well in the labor market, who probably were the first to go out during the pandemic and are going to be the last to come back as those industries need to recover. So states can also think about what kind of jobs do they want to train for. So we really encourage states to think about, you know, there's a requirement actually under the law, and it's in our state plan, where states are required to consult with their state workforce board when they're designing their program. And we really want that consultation to be around things like, where are the jobs in our local communities? What are the high growth, high road, good, stable jobs in our communities? And then think about, well, how can we take people who maybe are not going to get that job today, but build a career pathway? We like career pathways very much. We like sector partnerships very much. The Farm Bill, the most recent Farm Bill, allows E&T funds to be used to subsidize wages now. So we created, we have a work-based learning component in our program now that can be subsidized or unsubsidized, but we really want to support work-based learning, not subsidized employment, but really work-based learning, so people can gain skills, and that the payback for that investment will be more than just for the length of time that the subsidy is in place. So we really want to encourage states to think about, what would a work-based learning program where we're combining training and pay for employment, where we really combine that in important ways, so people can maybe take that time out of the labor market where they don't have to race from one job or two jobs or three jobs to then come and do training, but where we can really lift some of that burden. So there's a lot of possibility in E&T if states are willing to think about it. The challenge is, as I said before, our state SNAP agencies are really, their job, their mission, their responsibilities to make sure people have access to food. So the colleges and the CBOs and the other people who are already doing this work, you can really help us by reaching out to the state SNAP agency and having some conversations with them and helping them understand these are the services that exist in our local community. We'd really like to be a part of this. We would like to work with you to figure out how to do this. Will you do that with us? If they say no, you should come tell us, and we will go and say to them also, we would really like you to talk to these people. This is really the kind of services that we want to see. So, and then I'll add, and Kate Kinder, who I think is one of the next speakers, they did this work in Oregon when she was with Portland Community College, where they really looked at their program and tried to think about what are the services and supports we need to give people so that they can succeed. If a non-traditional student, who's really a traditional student at this point, but if what we call a non-traditional student comes in, what is it that we need to give them so that they can succeed? And E&T can help with that. All of our participant reimbursements, reasonable, necessary, and directly related to participation in E&T. So there's a lot of space to provide people with the kinds of supports that they need. So not just to be in class, but to succeed in class and to succeed in class. So states can think about their programs, providers can think about their programs. E&T funds can really fill in a lot of holes and a lot of gaps, but you have to think about it and you have to work at it.
That's amazing. I'd love to throw one more question at you, just based on some things you just shared as we close up. Thinking about work-based learning, there's quite a few people on the line who are post-secondary connected, who are from workforce board connections and labor side. As we're thinking about work-based learning, where does the focus of the opportunity lie? Is it in pre-apprenticeships, youth apprenticeships? Is it in more informal work-based learning internships? Is it all the way up to registered apprenticeship support? What does that look like, and how does SNAP E&T sort of weave into what states are thinking about work-based learning?
So we define work-based learning very broadly. We use the Perkins 5 definition of work-based learning. So it can be not youth apprenticeship, because our program is not designed for like youth. You have to be at least 16 to participate in E&T. So if programs that target 16 to 24-year-olds, that would be okay. But well, it's a little complicated, but we could talk about that. If that's something you want to do, we can talk about it. But so really any of these things, but so pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship, registered apprenticeship, internships, work study programs, like it's pretty broad. The thing that we're very focused on and we're very committed to is employment is not an E&T component, because if a state was operating a mandatory program, it could then just say you have to go get a job or lose your SNAP benefits. So employment is not an E&T component. So subsidized employment is not an E&T component. Work-based learning, subsidized work-based learning is an E&T component. So we're very focused on the learning part. We really want it to drive skills. The wage subsidy, if you choose to do a subsidized work-based learning program, you can also do a unsubsidized work-based learning program if you want, but if you choose to do a subsidized work-based learning program, the subsidy is good because it will give people that ability to step out of the labor market, but it's really about the learning part. We really want to drive people's skills so that when they leave E&T, they can get a job where they can earn enough money to not need SNAP. That's really the goal of SNAP E&T, is to move people to the point where they have stable, decent employment and they don't need us anymore. So it can be a lot of things. Work-based learning is new to us. This is the first year the states could do it. We did not have a lot of states that submitted work-based learning as part of their E&T plan because we have not provided a lot of guidance yet. We're working on guidance. It's in clearance, but that can take a while. So we have not had a lot of states that have applied to do it. They can, as we go though, we'll give more guidance over the course of the year, and states can always amend their plans and include it. So I think there's space for people who have some expertise in doing work-based learning. I think our state SNAP agencies would really like to hear from you because they could really use your expertise.
We had a tag-on question that we can probably end with from Patricia in the chat. Subsidized employment has been a challenge to implement as participants may no longer be SNAP eligible. Do you have suggestions on how to have success with work-based experience?
Yeah, so the law does not, so in order to be eligible for SNAP, there are income limits on SNAP eligibility. The law does not allow FNS to disregard the income earned through E&T, so it has to count towards that income eligibility for SNAP. So it is possible that you could put somebody into a subsidized work-based learning program, and they'd earn so much that they'd go off of SNAP, they'd go out of E&T, they'd lose their subsidy. They'd be eligible for SNAP, they come on SNAP, they get into E&T, they get their subsidy, put them over income, they'd lose their, so it can be a terrible, unrighteous cycle. So it is important that states sort of think about and do some math to help people understand. This is how many hours you could participate in our subsidized part of our work-based learning program before you go over income. If you want to, and you could have a conversation with a participant that says, look, if you want to work my hours in this, so long as you understand that you'll go over eligibility for SNAP, that's up, that's a choice that you can make. But I do think it's important that states think about how they want to design that subsidized component. Maybe providers should think about, well, if somebody goes off of SNAP, do we have other funding available to keep them in this subsidized component? If not, then it's really important that you design your program in such a way so maybe the number of hours somebody participates in this subsidized part of that is limited so that at least in the beginning, it keeps them, they remain eligible for SNAP, which keeps them eligible for E&T, which keeps them eligible for the subsidy. I will say there's a Farm Bill reauthorization that will be coming up before too much longer, which is amazing to think about that we're already there again. This is a function of the Act. The Act is very clear about what income can be disregarded in terms of eligibility. So, people who have an interest in this, I encourage you to think about what would need to happen in the Act to be able to do this. Hi, Patty.
Thank you so much, Rachel. We appreciate your willingness to join us today and to share all of your expertise and your insight. It was great for folks to hear directly from you about the priorities coming out of FNS, the flexibility that exists, your recommendations for collaboration, and sort of the homework that they need to do as they think about how best to innovate utilizing SNAP E&T. I'm sure you provided a lot of inspiration for the state teams that are going to be talking tomorrow. So I just want to say thank you for joining us today.
I'm so happy to do it. And I really appreciate that everybody is trying to figure out how to make this program work. And NGA for doing this and for making it a part of this conversation. It's amazing.
Well, I'm sure you're going to get lots of outreach, as will some of your regional leads. And we will definitely circle back with you and make sure that we're sharing all of the relevant information and follow up for this meeting. But thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure. Totally happy to do it.
Awesome. Well, now we've got even more experts to hear from. So I'm going to go ahead and transition the floor, or I guess the screen, over to my friend and colleague, Brett Visger from Education Strategy Group, who will be facilitating our next session with some critical partners. Brett?
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. As she said, I'm Brett Visger with Education Strategy Group, Senior Director of Post-Secondary Attainment. For those of you who aren't familiar with ESG, we are a mission-focused consulting firm really trying to promote economic mobility through credential attainment. And we are really pleased to be partnering with NGA on this work, but we are also doing it with a number of other national partners through the Recovery Coalition. So we're going to just take a minute to go through some overview from some of our key partners on this who do have relevant knowledge related to SNAP E&T. So we're going to start with NSC. And for those of you not familiar with NSC, they're outstanding advocacy organization and providing technical assistance, all about improving state and federal policy for ensuring high quality skills training, and then that can lead to economic mobility. And we have Kate Kinder, who is the State Strategies Director for the Western States for NSC. And prior to this role, and it was mentioned before, she played a key role at Portland Community College and the development of Oregon's Community College SNAP 50/50 program. So Kate, on to you.
Thank you so much, Brett, and thank you for having me here. I am going to just talk a little bit about how National Skills Coalition is supporting this work and how we can support the states. As mentioned, I had the opportunity to develop and lead the Community College Consortia in Oregon with all 17 community colleges, which was a very collaborative project with Oregon Department of Human Services. And we started that actually because of some technical assistance that we received through NSC and SJI. And then NSC has been really key in supporting the advancement of policies and practices in Oregon that have advanced economic mobility, connections to supportive services, and access to post-secondary education. So really excited to be in this role, supporting states and state teams to be doing the same. Next slide, please. As Brett mentioned, NSC is a nonprofit organization that's really focused on increasing access to inclusive high quality skills training, really understanding that that benefits both workers and our economy and employers. And that we really see that as a key to advancing racial equity and for an inclusive economic recovery. We also really believe that this requires changing policies and changing the conversation. And I think one of the things that I found in my prior role to be really unique and continue as being part of the organization that's unique about NSC is it's really based on networks and coalitions and working across policy issues. So working with human service, higher education, workforce development, really understanding that those policies all impact a worker, impact a student, impact an adult. And so we can best benefit and transform opportunity if we are working across those issues. And if we're doing it in a way that elevates the voices and honors the expertise of workers, businesses, community colleges, state agencies, policymakers, CBOs, and really come together to transform the system and increase opportunity. And the way we do that is really looking at what are those levers at the federal level. So, you know, what are SNAP E&T, and then what does that look like at the state level? And so National Skills Coalition provides advocacy based on the input from the network at both federal and state level, and then also provides, as Brett mentioned, that technical assistance. And so really, we're not a deep think tank technical assistance provider, but what we do is provide support to make sure that those policies are implemented as intended and for maximum impact. And I'll say that was really critical in Oregon for us in building out an effective E&T model. That was really based on skills training, understanding what an intermediary model would look like, understanding what the fiscal piece were, like building it around compliance, but really building it for the impact that we wanted to have. Next slide. The other piece too that I would encourage you all to look into if you aren't involved is to see if your state is involved in the SkillSpan network, which was really helpful in us in elevating student voice and driving policy to support E&T. So SkillSpan is the first ever national network of coalitions really focused on advancing state skills policies that expand economic opportunity for workers and really also meet the needs of small and mid-sized local businesses. And really focused on advancing that access to education, post-secondary skill, credentials, skills training, and those jobs. And Rachel Hirsch here was really integral in leading that and developing that. So thanks to Rachel. And so please reach out, but that's a really good policy lever to really expand E&T. Next slide. And so in terms of our resources, we will be working or releasing next month a skills-based SNAP E&T Career Pathways Toolkit, thanks to some Lumina funding. And this is really meant to complement all the other existing fantastic technical assistance that's out there. So we're not trying to replicate what's being done through the national grantees or SGI or APHSA or ACCT, but really complement it. And so what's unique about this is it'll really be looking at how do you use this to build career pathways partnerships that really advance economic mobility and build out those career pathway systems. I tried to integrate information that was a lot of the questions that I would get in my past role for other states. And so we'll be releasing the toolkit, and then they'll be doing technical assistance as well to help you figure out how do you build out those partnerships? How do you design a human-centered system that does reach those who've been most marginalized and impacted and increases skills training to get into those good jobs? And then also how this can really be positioned as a lever to advance racial equity and economic mobility in states for an inclusive recovery and part of a really robust equity-focused workforce development ecosystem that maximizes partnerships and is designed to serve the worker. So please reach out if you're interested. We'll be doing a deeper dive tomorrow for the state teams around Oregon, but I'd be happy to provide any resources.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kate. And now we heard a little bit earlier from Rebecca Wilkie from the International Rescue Committee, and I'm going to turn it over to Erica Boris, who is the Director of Economic Empowerment for IRC. Erica?
Great, thank you. So nice to be with you all here today, and it's really been a delightful conversation. And yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit more. So if you'd like to advance to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So for those of you who aren't familiar with IRC, and I know you had a chance to meet kind of our Boise folks in particular, you know, IRC is a large global organization here in the US. We serve about 55,000 people a year with a wide range of community-based services with a strong focus on refugees and immigrants. Workforce programming is a big part of what we do. It's not the only thing we do, but it's a big part of what we do. And really the goal of our programs are to help diverse low-income populations with, again, strong focus on immigrants, refugees, and English language learners to prepare for and secure good quality jobs. We serve about 10,000 people a year across a wide range of workforce development programs, some which partner with SNAP E&T, some which have nothing to do with SNAP E&T. But we really do have that focus on helping people both get a first job and then advance in their careers. The other thing that I would flag is we also are a technical assistance provider. We provide TA to state workforce systems, local workforce systems, TANF programs, and others, specifically around the issue of ensuring that their programming is responsive, accessible, and supports the success of immigrant, refugee, and English language learner populations. So we do both the direct service side of the house, technical assistance side of the house, and we collaborate with some of our very strong policy partners in trying to also advance policy in some of these spaces. Next slide, please. So you had a chance to hear an example of one of the SNAP E&T programs in our network. You know, in Idaho, they are doing great work really across a few different program areas that are able to leverage the private philanthropic dollars that are supporting that work, and they're able to leverage those to receive SNAP E&T reimbursements because, again, a significant portion of the individuals that our Boise team serves are SNAP recipients. I'll very briefly just highlight two other examples. I have so appreciated how several of our presenters and speakers today have really emphasized that SNAP E&T, particularly the 50/50 funds, really allow and encourage a lot of flexibility in program design. And I think we certainly at IRC see that in our work. I should have mentioned it earlier, but we do operate in 25 cities across the US. We have a pretty broad geographic footprint here. In California, we are a SNAP E&T partner, and one of the programs that we have been able to kind of co-develop and take advantage of SNAP E&T funding for is actually a program that serves young adults, primarily 18 to 24-year-olds. It's a place-based program, so it actually takes place at a really cool urban farm here in San Diego, and it is a program that focuses on helping people develop employment and work readiness skills, but again, in this very sort of place-based way. So they have opportunities to learn customer service skills through work that they do in community-supported agriculture and other types of programs. And again, it's a really, I think, unique way to leverage both earned income and philanthropic dollars and extend those dollars with SNAP E&T funding. In fact, it's been so successful that it has recently spun off into its own organization separate from IRC, which is just really cool to see. We also do a lot of SNAP E&T work in Maryland, and I think here one of the things I would emphasize is that SNAP E&T funding has been able to help expand and scale some of the work that we were doing around helping refugee and immigrant job seekers access career coaching, particularly the kind of coaching they might need to move into a higher skill, higher wage job, as well as occupational skills training. In Maryland in particular, we have a pretty significant asylee population. A lot of times that population is comprised of, low-income individuals who might be single or not have any minor children, so they're not going to be enrolled in programs like TANF, and SNAP E&T is a really good opportunity for them to get additional support. So those are just three examples, but I think what I would really emphasize again is just how great it is that you can develop a flexible program that works for the specific population in your community, that's responsive to local labor market needs, local partnerships, community assets, and really build a program that works. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all program. Next slide, please. I was asked to speak just a little bit about opportunities to work with us. So you are seeing in front of you the footprint of IRC offices. There actually are two that are not on here, but we are opening a Spokane, Washington office and a Louisville, Kentucky office as well. So those will be coming online this year. But otherwise, you can see all the other places that we work. We are absolutely always delighted and open to have conversations about how we might be able to support SNAP E&T programming, again, with a specific focus on English language learners, refugee and immigrant populations that we often see as having some real barriers to accessing sort of traditional workforce programs or traditional community college programs. So we're happy to have those conversations with anyone who are in some of these communities where we are also present. As I noted before, we also are a technical assistance provider and have worked quite a bit with providing TA to systems that are trying to serve English language learners with workforce programming, career pathway programming. For example, in California, we're the current technical assistance provider for all of the English language learner grantees and projects up and down the state. So we really see this as an opportunity. We believe in SNAP E&T. We believe that there are some real opportunities to use these resources to better serve immigrant, refugee, and English language learner job seekers. And we would love to, provide support if we can as a sounding board, as a source of technical assistance, capacity building to help your state teams do the same. So I'll stop there.
Right. Thank you so much, Erica. And now we'll go on to talk to our next partner, the Coalition for Adult Basic Education. They provide leadership, communication, and professional development and advocacy to adult ed and literacy practitioners to advance adult ed. So with that, I'd like to Sharon.
Thank you so much, Brett. Hello, everybody. I'm Sharon Bonney. I'm the CEO for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. I have some slides here on my screen if I'm able to pull those up. Do you think I could possibly do that, Rachel? If so, I would pull them up.
Yes, you should be able to, yeah.
Great. Okay, let me 1 second here. I'm going to share these. Can everybody see my slides? Okay, so our organization, as Brett mentioned, we provide leadership, advocacy, professional development, and communication to the field. I just wanted to mention that SNAP E&T will be a focus at the COABE 2022 conference. For those of you who aren't aware, the Coalition on Adult Basic Education holds a conference for, well, the last 2 years, it's been over 3,000 attendees from across the nation. We have multiple different concurrent sessions that run throughout the 3 days where we hold this conference. And our goal really is provide professional development to the field. So at these specific conferences, that's what we do. The same is true for our 2020 and 2021 conference. There was definitely a focus on this. So I want to encourage you all. You could have access to some of our files where we've had expert presenters talk on this topic. And what we do is we find experts in the field and then we promote them and highlight them at the national conference. So wanted to mention that that's available to you. Also just wanted to mention that we just finished up National Adult Ed and Family Literacy Week, where we fight for funding. And this is one area where we're fighting for funding as well, where we're trying to impact policy too. So that is also available to you. And we have a lot of resources on our COABE website. I wanted to mention that we have an adult educator repository, and a number of the sessions that have been done at our national conference are there in our repository. They're free of charge to our members. So just wanted to mention that's also available to you, as well as our upcoming webinars. So we have 50 to 75 webinars annually. This is a great resource to our members. It's free of charge again. And we do this so that we can, again, promote those presenters in the field that we feel will really spread the professional development. So those are just some resources that COABE has available to our members. What we do, again, is we try to promote those who are experts in the field, try to give them a voice and a platform. And we've had a number of webinars, a number of sessions on SNAP E&T. So I just wanted to mention that. And Brett, I could turn it over.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Sharon. And then lastly, you've already heard a bit from APHSA and Mary Nelson, but she's going to come back and talk a little bit more specifically about what the American Public Human Services Association does in this regard. Mary?
I was muted. I'm so sorry. Thanks so much, Brett. And I'm going to keep this short and sweet. So, I already kind of shared a little bit about what APHSA is. What I will say is we have several affinity groups that really drill down on the specific programs within Health and Human Services, and that includes our State Association for SNAP Directors. So, all of you who are on the line who are working in your state and local human services departments, you're our members. So please always feel free to reach out to us if you have questions about the work that you're doing, in particular, if you have questions about SNAP employment and training. I'm happy to hear from you all. We do peer information requests. We do a lot of information sharing. And, you know, just generally, we're here to support you. Your success is our success. So if we can go to the next slide. I also talked a little bit about our national partnership grant, and I shared a link a little while ago that I know you all are going to get and you didn't see in the chat, but really sharing some more information both about our own project and our other 4 fellow grantees that started last year. And I know there are some additional grantees that are about to kick off, but I just wanted to give a little more context around that grant. So we have partnered with the Association of Community College Trustees and the National Association of Community Action Partnerships, which is the Association for Community Action Agencies, to really use their networks to stand up SNAP E&T learning cohorts of community action agencies and community colleges. So for you all on the line, if you're a community college or a community action agency that's interested in participating in that project, we have already started, but we do have some space for additional opportunities as we move along in the next 2 years. So please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share more information and connect you with the right contact points at those respective organizations. And then the other thing I want to share about the grant project is that we are also really using this as an opportunity to dive in deep with our membership of state and local human services agencies, as well as the provider networks, to really understand what makes a good partnership and what makes a good program. And really, you know, Rachel's comments around leveraging 2-gen approaches and how you can really make these programs fit your community's needs are a great launching point for some of the work that we're doing around building out technical assistance tools to really support that effort of how do you make a program that meets those community needs, that really drives economic mobility, that puts individuals on career pathways, and really supports all the things that I think are important to most of us here on the line to really be a strong support for our community so that they can move forward in their goals and in their economic mobility. So we have a couple of things that we have been working on that will be released by the end of the year. And I'm sorry, I really hoped that they were going to be released by the time we had this session, but unfortunately we've been working on some other stuff and it got kind of pushed back a little. But one of the things is a framework for partnership collaboration and supporting growth of those kinds of partnerships that's written both from the perspective of the state and local agency, but also from the provider. So there's some really good insight on what are the levers you need to pull to really put together an effective relationship that really supports the individuals that you're serving. So keep an eye out for that. We also have been standing up a webinar series, and we've held our first session was at our symposium, and we will have recordings available of the sessions that have already happened. So our symposium sessions were produced from a panel of providers and then paired with a corresponding panel of state agencies to really kind of be able to share from their perspective what works, what challenges did they experience along the way, what were their lessons learned. And I think there was a lot of really just great content to really learn from the folks who have gone before you in engaging in this process and leverage their knowledge. So that will be available soon as a recording. We also had our second webinar in this series with the Alabama Network of Family Resource Centers. And Family Resource Centers are, for those of you who aren't familiar, are our social services agencies that are typically networked at the state and national level. And a lot of times they function out of schools and implement early childcare systems. They do a lot of other stuff. And what's really cool about Alabama is they were able to coordinate with their legislator and as well as a gubernatorial initiative to provide a set funding stream for all of the family resource centers within Alabama to come together and form a network of TANF and SNAP employment and training providers. And they did it in a very conscientious way and thought very critically about how they were going to provide the training and technical assistance to these agencies so that they could really be good providers, but also have each other to lean on as a network. We'll be continuing to produce those kinds of webinars as we move into the next year, really lifting up lessons that we learn as we go through these projects. So those are tools that you all can take advantage of, and particularly for those of you who are in the community college space, because we're working directly with community colleges, there's a lot of that is being produced for community colleges and from the perspective of community colleges. So if we can go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, my colleague Brandy put these together and I didn't realize that she had a slide here of all of the things that I just said. So if we actually can go to the next one, and I know I'm running a little over, the last thing I want to highlight for those of you who are on the line or are connected with your human services agency is we do have a particular group put together for SNAP E&T agency staff. So this is a peer-to-peer learning opportunity. They meet every other month. We do a lot of information sharing, and it's just an opportunity for folks to come together who are running these programs to learn more from each other. And one of the reasons why we put this together is we noticed when we were interacting with our members, they have a lot of regional contact, but they don't have a lot of national contact. And so sometimes we were hearing from state staff saying, oh, we're the only state that does X, or, oh, you know, we've never heard of anyone else that does things this way, so we're just really forging the path. And oftentimes that wasn't necessarily true. And we would say, actually, we know of another state that's doing this. Do you want to be connected and have these conversations with one another? So that's kind of where the SNAP E&T work group came from. So it's a really robust group. We have representation from, I would say, about 2/3 of the states, but anyone who is working at the state human services level within the SNAP E&T program is welcome to join. All you need to do is email me and I'll get you set up. So that's really all I have. Thank you so much for having us. Actually, one final thing I want to say, we're very open to collaboration in general at APHSA. So if there's something that you are interested in working with us on or want to know more about what we're doing, please always feel free to reach out to me. We're happy to be a network of networks and really pride ourselves on being able to be a connection point for agencies that are going to really maximize the impact of the work we do. Now I'll stop. I'm a talker, but thank you so much again for having me, and I'll hand it back over to Brett.
Thank you so much, Mary. Lots of great information, and now we're getting down into the home stretch. And I'm going to actually turn it over to my colleague, Tiffany, who's going to summarize the last 2 hours and 40 minutes in a couple minutes and tee us up for tomorrow. But if anybody who is capable of doing it, I know it is Tiffany. So
no Tiffany. Small task. Thank you, Brett. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Williams. I'm a senior associate with ESG. I have the pleasure of closing us out today. So thank you so much for joining us. I know it was really informative for me. I hope it was for you as well. And many thanks to our speakers. We could not have done this event without you and your expertise, for sure. So I know we threw a lot of information at you today. We know this is really complex, even for the more experienced folks in the room. And these few hours are just the tip of the iceberg, but I would like to just summarize some of the key points and themes and encourage you all to really rely on the resources that were shared today and continue this conversation in your own states. So some takeaways that I just want to reiterate before we part ways. Things, again, I hope you'll continue to think about, especially those of you that are one of the 13 state teams that we'll be working closely with tomorrow to take a deeper dive. So first and foremost, Partnership and collaboration are the cornerstone of successful SNAP E&T programs. And really, I think what we learned per Susan's Venn diagram is that partnership is really where the participants in the program, services, capacity, and funds all meet. And inherent in that and in SNAP E&T is linking across agencies, programs, needs, because although the State Human Service Agency operates the program, it really relies heavily on workforce to understand what's needed in the labor market and other partners really to deliver ultimately. And in partnership, community colleges came up as a really natural and important partner in state SNAP E&T because really their core function and their mission is as we mentioned, intermediaries, connections to labor, career pathways, apprenticeships. There's a lot of ways that community colleges can really be valuable as you all are looking at this program. Reminder that states have the flexibility to really design programs that meet the needs of their communities, thinking beyond compliance and really supporting individuals in that career pathway. And I think we heard, especially from IRC in Idaho, really illuminated the individual case for this work, as well as really showing us a real example on the ground of how to do this well. Many thanks also to Rachel for reminding us that families that receive school lunch probably qualify for SNAP, and under SNAP, there's an opportunity for E&T. So thinking about the directionality of that and the kind of impact that something like SNAP E&T can have on an entire family, children's, adults to children, that two-gen approach really. But consider starting with an understanding of your environment. So engage with the good work that's already happening. Who could be a good partner? Who is already a good partner? Really thinking about the capacity that's necessary to do this kind of work. So not just administrative capacity, but funding as well. I think we heard also that ARPA funds can be used here to invest in SNAP E&T, using it functionally as 100% funds, right? So I know that we have at least a couple of states that are joining us tomorrow. They're really interested in how to leverage ARPA. So I hope that you all took away from this conversation that there is the opportunity and availability to do that. But at the end of the day, I think the message here is that there is flexibility. You can amend those plans and there's room for innovation. Innovation is encouraged. Design programs that can reach your priority populations for folks that are low income, struggling to attach to the labor market, those that have been impacted by the pandemic. And while this is really complex, I think we shouldn't be afraid to really dig in and create opportunities that really advance recovery. And there's partners that can help you in the work. You just heard from a number of them. Their expertise, their resources, their services are available to help you to drive policy, support implementation, technical assistance, and just add some needed capacity for this work. So for those of you that are joining us just for this first day of the lab, thank you again. Please be on the lookout for a follow-up from us with the PowerPoints from today and resources, especially those that were dropped in the chat. For the state teams that are joining us for the deep dive, we look forward to that and we're excited to see you. We hope that what you've learned today can really be brought into that conversation and help you with planning moving forward. So with that, I think I will look to my partners for some indication here, but I think we are all set for this event. Again, we really appreciate you all joining us, and we hope to continue engaging with you on this topic going forward.